I think he's making the best he can of a pretty uncomfortable position. He's trying to sound like he's in command. He's trying to sound strong. He's trying to sound tough, even though he's just been exposed. The state of politics now in Russia, I would suggest, after 23 years of stability, has now entered a new era of great instability. And now that Putin's weakness has been exposed, with not only did Prigozhin strip away his storyline justifying the invasion of Ukraine and called it a bunch of lies, he's also exposed the military weakness of the Russian regime by being able to bring an armed convoy within 200 kilometers of Moscow, essentially unopposed. And thirdly, while all that was going on, we saw nobody of any standing in the military system, in the political system, or in the business sector coming out with a clear public statement of support in favor of Putin. So it exposed Putin's weakness, and you can be pretty sure that all the elites in Moscow are now positioning for the post-Putin era. And it's just a matter of exactly the detail of how and when it unravels, but it is now unraveling.
I do want to turn to China now, Peter. It's been viewing this from not so far. And of course, it is a major ally of Russia. But how do you think Beijing has been viewing the events of the past week?
Well, I'd put them in two categories, Girish. I'd say the public reaction is one thing, and the likely private reaction is entirely another. The public reaction has been to try to offer Moscow and Putin in particular as much assurance and support as possible. It just happened that Russia's deputy foreign minister was in Beijing over the weekend while the putsch attempt was underway. And China has made a point of coming out with some very reassuring statements saying that China-Russia relations are now better than they've ever been, Girish, better than they've ever been. That China will continue to support Russia's stability. In other words, doesn't want to see Putin replaced and wants to see Putin remain. Will continue to support its development and prosperity. And China's even coached its official media to be very polite about this, Girish, and politely look the other way. The party-owned media gave prominence to a story about an exchange of letters between between Xi Jinping, the president of China, and a Belgian zookeeper, where they were writing about pandas. Second news item was something about an attempted insurrection in Moscow. So that's been very polite and trying to be very reassuring. But I'd suggest that privately, this will have Beijing concerned. First, concerned for the stability of Russia. The last thing it wants is chaos on a very long 2,000-kilometre border that it has with Russia. Secondly, it will cause some self-reflection in the Chinese regime, I would suggest. There was an internet meme going around on the weekend, Xi Jinping writing memo to self, no mercenaries. And while China has long had a law that prohibits private military companies, China does have private security companies, and some of those have become rather large and powerful. So I would suggest there's probably going to be a close eye cast over how China needs to take some firm steps to control those military companies. So they're the two broad reactions I'd suggest, Girish.
Yeah, Peter, face-to-face, though, how has the events of the past week had an impact, I suppose, in the relationship between Vladimir Putin and his Chinese counterpart?
Well, we haven't seen any face-to-face contact, but we have seen the statements from Beijing offering support for Russian stability and offering to continue to support Russia. And the official level statements and the media statements have all been overwhelmingly and uniformly positive.
Beyond the Wagner rebellion, looking at the wider Ukraine conflict, of course, China is an energy-hungry nation. It also depends on Russia, but also Ukraine. How do you see China viewing the Ukraine war? Has that changed since clearly we've seen Vladimir Putin's leadership, cracks in the leadership exposed?
Yes, well, there's no public evidence of a change in China's attitude to Russia and the war in Ukraine. But as you say, China has has really made a point of buying as much energy, oil and gas as possible from Russia since this war began. And it will continue that policy, Girish, because it does support Putin's presidency and it does support the continued unified rule in Russia. So therefore, whenever China buys a barrel of oil from Russia, it's putting money directly into the fiscal solvency of the Putin regime and helping to pay for his war machine. And it is by far now the biggest buyer of Russian oil and gas. So it will continue to do that, and it will continue to look for other ways to support China without going the next step of unduly antagonizing NATO, the US, and Ukraine, especially because it looks increasingly as if the war ultimately is going to go Ukraine's way, and Russia wants to be able to keep access to Ukrainian assets and resources.
Okay, Peter, let's look at home. Of course, Anthony Albanese announced more than $100 million support for Ukraine's military, but it is missing a few things that Ukraine is asking for, and some defense analysts are saying that it's underwhelming.
Well, the official Ukrainian government reaction has been very polite and grateful, but the reality, as you say, Girish, is that not only is the Australian support package for Ukraine missing some of the things Ukraine was asking for, it's missing all of the things, the three big things that it was asking for. And top of the list, and this is something that the Ukrainians have been campaigning for 9 months now, is the Hawkeye armoured vehicle, which is an Australian-made invention. The great advantage of it isn't just that it protects troops on the move. Its advantage is that it can be fitted with a very highly effective and accurate missile interception system. So it gives air cover to troops trying to shield from incoming missiles, drones, or whatever. It's the same missile. It's called the NASAM missile intercept system. It's the same one that the White House uses to protect itself. This was what the Ukrainians really wanted, and the Australians have ruled that out. They've also ruled out more Bushmasters, which was the second request, and they've also ruled out tanks, Abrams tanks, which was the third Ukrainian request. So privately, I'm sure the Ukrainians are feeling very disappointed. They're getting a bunch of old gear from Australia. They're not getting what they wanted. It's really sort of minimal assistance. And I noted, however, that the government hasn't elaborated on whether it might provide more or announce some more assistance for Ukraine when Anthony Albanese is in Europe at the summit in just a couple of weeks. And perhaps the Australian government has some more goodies to announce then. But if this is it, this is a bleak day in terms of what Australia is delivering the Ukrainians.
Peter Hartcher, great to get your analysis as always. Thanks very much.
Pleasure, Girish.